So, there's two video game series that I've consistently found myself attached to since my early childhood. Both are JRPGs, and both have long histories and nigh countless installments and spin offs attached to their name. One, as you might imagine, is the Final Fantasy series, which kinda set the stage for the types of stories and themes I've grown to like nowadays. The other, however, is the Tales series, which has definitely set the foundation for the types of characters and world building that I tend to appreciate nowadays. Of course, my tastes have grown since I was 8 years old, and my enjoyment of stories has expanded well beyond video games and now include many different mediums. Still, I can't help but think that there's something extremely touching about playing a video game and connecting with the story and characters. In the most well done video games, it can feel as though you're experiencing the narrative yourself alongside the characters. The stakes are there, your decisions matter. The better and smarter that you play, the better the outcome. 9 times out of 10 at least. So, why am I mentioning all of this? Since you've seen the title of this video, you'd know that I'm not really intending to talk about a video game per se. That's true to an extent. What we're discussing today is an anime adaptation of a video game, but I feel it's a bit important to get some context going before we dive into it, so bear with me for a second. Now, video game narratives are beasts, especially JRPG video game narratives. This is because almost all JRPGs tell a story that takes place in an original, fantastical world, which places the weight of world building alongside things like plot, characters, design, and gameplay. It's not enough just to throw some plot points and characters on the screen and hope that they can stand on their own supported by the gameplay. Everything in the game has to be supported by world building, or things don't make sense. And to most people who play JRPGs, there's only so much of things not making sense that we'll take before we check out and lose interest. So, great JRPGs tend to be long, because not only is there a main plot to get through, there also has to be a bunch of little subplots and extra detail to expand upon the world so that the main plot both makes sense and is engaging enough to finish. Most JRPG plots have a world-ending threat going on, so we kinda have to care about the world and characters in order for the game to hit us like they tend to want it to. This isn't a be-all, end-all rule, by the way. Naturally, there are games that benefit from less detail and looser world building. These types of games are normally sought out for their exploration of very specific themes or their very specific style of gameplay. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about the Tales games, which do the world building thing very, very, very well, in my opinion. When you pick up a mainline Tales title, you're pretty much guaranteed to get two things. One is a cast of unique and interesting characters that have some pretty basic character tropes at the heart of their creation, but grow into more complex and well-explored versions of themselves as the story goes along. Another is a unique world, also based in some common tropes, but expanded upon to have its own unique history, cultures, and rules. The Tales series is my favorite video game series because the games tend to focus very heavily on fleshing out the characters and the world in support of each individual game's themes. And also, just by virtue of the tropes that they choose to work with and the stories that they choose to tell, playing a Tales game often feels like playing an anime, which is arguably my second favorite medium for storytelling. There's always something interesting about adapting the story from one medium into a different one. Different elements of the story and themes get put on display in the transition, and at times it can feel like you've got a whole different narrative going on entirely. That being said, video game narratives very rarely translate well into other mediums. If you ask me why that is, then I'd say that this is likely because there's an element of audience participation in video games that can't be mimicked in other forms of media. And the stories of video games are built around this audience participation. The basic plot and characters may be easy enough to transfer over into a movie or TV show or book, but the world building, often explored and found by that audience participation, sometimes just can't be. Which means you've generally got a plot and a group of characters not supported by the level of detail and context that you get from an audience experiencing the rest of the world as a player. If you're going to adapt a video game into another medium, the best one for it is probably an anime or a manga. Novels work too. Movies should generally be avoided in my opinion, unless they plan on telling a very limited and contained story that does not try to bring in multiple characters and themes from the original work. And even then, the lack of time that can be devoted to exploring the world and giving context to the things happening on screen can make it difficult to get invested. An anime adaptation sounds pretty good on paper, but animes tend to be limited in scope with how much time they get to tell the story and the resources they have at their disposal to make it look good. There's also the occasional hang-up where the plot suffers from just not being as interesting without the audience participation. There's quite a few times where the story, characters, and world of a video game just become a little boring without the gameplay backing it up. I say all that to say, video game stories don't often translate well into other mediums, but the Tales series story tend to adapt very well into animation. So, without further ado, let's talk about Tales of Symphonia, the animation.
だから
I'm going to argue that Tales of Symphonia, the animation, stands well enough on its own as a self-contained story that you can go into it without necessarily having played the game. But I'm still going to recommend that you give it a shot because the game is great. I'm going to try and avoid too many explicit story spoilers for both the game and the anime, but I will be talking around specific moments and story beats, so if you'd rather go into either one of these things blind, then this is my official recommendation that you go and do that, and then come back. Otherwise, let's talk about it. The basic premise of the story of Tales of Symphonia is that this klutzy young lady, who goes by the name of Colette, is the Chosen. For context, the world of Silverant, the settings of Tales of Symphonia, is in a state of decline due to a lack of mana. Mana can easily be defined as the sort of lifeblood and energy of the world. When there's not enough of it, life gets significantly harder on the populace. Colette, as the Chosen, is the only one capable of reversing the world's decline by embarking on the journey of world regeneration, in which she'll go around to 4 elemental seals located across the land and start the flow of mana again anew, and ultimately end up at the Tower of Salvation, which only appears to the world when a Chosen has popped up, where she'll then offer up her prayers to Martel, this world's goddess, and then the world will be saved for a stretch of time. It's not that difficult to digest this plot. There's more to it, of course, but the basic premise is simple enough, and it is indeed communicated well enough in the opening scenes of the anime. And this is immediately where we get our first divergence from what happens in the game compared to the anime. In the video game, information about the Chosen is slowly fed to you as a player over the course of the opening moments of the narrative, and it takes until around a few hours in for the player to really have all the basics about the journey of regeneration down. In the anime, you're told everything you need to know within the first episode. And this will be the trend for pretty much the rest of the anime. Most of the main plot points and story beats that the game hits during a playthrough will be touched on with an almost clinical efficiency in the animation. There's no time wasted at all here. The pacing in the anime is very fast for the first 4 episodes. This has its benefits as well as its drawbacks. For one, the biggest benefit it has is making the narrative concise and easy to understand. Much of the fluff is cut out here in the anime. Everything is always straight to the point, and if you're someone who doesn't like filler and likes for every moment of the experience to count towards something, then this OVA definitely does that. On the other hand, there's significant exploration of the world and characters that's missing here. So if your biggest draw is seeing those character interactions and moments, which pretty much every Tales game excels at, then you're gonna find yourself wanting a bit here. It's also important to note that the main cast comes off a bit different in the anime than they do in the game. Tales of Symphonia as a video game has a rather bright and warm color palette to it, and the atmosphere of the game tends to follow. All of the characters are certainly well-rounded and fleshed out, but there's significantly more attention given to humor and light-hearted moments in the game as opposed to the anime. The OVA's palette is a bit darker, a bit grayer, less saturated than the video game. It has a very cool and almost solemn tone to it, and the characters follow. Everyone is just a tad bit more serious here. They all retain the charm and quirks that they had in the game, I'd argue, but less attention is drawn to that here than there is really focusing on the emotional intensity of the story. And if you ask me, that's where the anime really shines the most. Tales of Symphonia's story is complex and multifaceted, but there's a consistent tone of hopefulness and triumph that follows the party. Even when things get bleak and dark, there's always a sense of optimism to be found in the experience. That light tone is more muted in the anime, and because of it, dark and emotional moments hit a lot harder here than they do in the game. The word of the day here is emotional, because a lot of these moments in the story really tug on the heartstrings and make you feel for the characters. I found myself moved to tears several times during the course of watching this anime again for this video, especially in the later episodes. As an example, there's this moment where Lloyd learns what it really means for Colette to be the chosen, and the steep price that the journey is asking of her. His reaction in the game is one of righteous anger and incredulity, and the player is led to feel that frustration alongside him. Here, Lloyd reacts with despair and horror, breaking down into tears, and the audience is given a sense of hopelessness that really hits you in the chest, especially because the anime portrays Lloyd and Colette's relationship as much more intimate and sweet, with them openly showing affection for one another, as opposed to how the game portrays them in a teasing, almost sibling-esque type of way, with Lloyd constantly teasing and picking at Colette, and her responding to some of the things he says with a sort of endearing obliviousness. The anime is also pretty smartly directed. Because of the fast pace the story has to take, there is not much time to do things like heavy foreshadowing or dropping hints and clues about what's going to happen. In fact, the anime does a lot of outright showing the audience plot twists before the characters. To balance it out though, the anime plays to the strength of animation and this visual medium, and uses smart framing and scene composition at times to kind of hint at what the characters are thinking. As an example, at this point in the story, we know what's up with Zelos, because the anime shows us very clearly much earlier on. Here we see him standing to the side and observing the rest of the party, and upon being asked for help, there's a second of pause before he actually draws his weapon. Knowing what you know about Zelos from either the game or even an earlier episode of this second arc, this framing has a lot of subtle implications to it. Almost as though he's deliberating whether or not he's going to actually help them or if he's just going to continue to watch. This is a very low-key but still very effective look at Zelos as a character, and it comes full circle with him later on and within the narrative. I don't think that I need to say that the anime looks spectacular. This is Ufotable after all. I will say, there is a massive leap in visual quality from the first arc of episodes to the second and last arc, but that's to be expected given the 3-year gap in production and release that's found in between the first two arcs. That being said, the first 4 episodes have aged quite well, and still look pretty good by today's standards if I do say so myself. And there's even quite a bit of unique and fluid animation to be found with them as well. Many moments that prove that Ufotable has always known how to make a show look great. There are few things lost, given the anime's limited scope naturally. The original game weaves in a decently compelling, albeit a bit idealistic, narrative surrounding discrimination and prejudice. In fact, it becomes one of the main driving factors behind the plot, and I enjoy the way it was done. Anime does this too, but much more sporadically than the game. So when it becomes significantly more important to the plot towards the end of the show, it can feel a bit rushed. Still, I don't dislike it at all. As with many other things, when putting the game next to the anime, the show does frame these moments in a much more intensely emotional way. So, it's not really a complaint, as it is me wishing that the anime had just a few more episodes to work with. There's also a character that kinda comes out of nowhere towards the end with little rhyme or reason and plays a huge role in the ending. The same character also plays a huge role in the ending of the game, seemingly out of nowhere as well, but at least in the game they were introduced to the audience well before the closing moments. There's also just a lot of character moments that were found in the game that simply didn't make it here that I feel were pretty important to their individual stories. But the anime does well enough with having our main cast play off one another for it to not really hurt their stories, in my opinion. Overall, the anime is just really solid. I like it a lot. The story is very competently told and there's a lot of emotion in it. And I think what sets it apart from a lot of other video game to anime tie-ins is that there's a level of care and effort here that really shows. These characters feel like they were done justice. The emotional moments have a weight to them that lingers after they've passed. It looks great. It sounds great. Hell, there's even an entire fake language that was created for the soundtrack, and I live for it. I definitely recommend checking it out. It can be found on Blu-ray, but the cost for that is pretty steep. You didn't hear it from me, but it is quite easy to find it fan-subbed online. If you haven't played the game yet, then I'll still recommend it, because I do think that the story works well enough on the show on its own, but I would also recommend that you check the game out after, or give the anime a second watch just to pick up on some of the more nuanced choices in the directing. And if you have played the game and you like these characters, then I honestly think that you owe it to yourself to give this anime a shot. Go into it with your expectations neutral and an open mind, and I am confident that you'll enjoy it. Alright, so now that we're done with the whole overview and recommendation part of the video, now I think I'm just going to take some time to highlight some moments that really stood out to me. Things that are, for better or for worse, I think the anime just left an impression for me for. So here's where you get your heavy spoilers warning. I will be talking about specific moments. I will be spoiling them. If you're not here for that, then thank you for sticking around this long anyway, and we'll see you next time. If you are here for that, then without further ado, and in no particular order, let's talk about them. I like that Kratos and Sheena are the ones that appear here to back up Lloyd. This was the party I chose in the video game too. This sequence with Sheena defending the townsfolk against the Desians is really good, and something I really wish was in the game a bit more. It makes Sheena seem a bit more, I don't know, badass, a bit more competent. It's just not that she came off as incompetent in the video game. It's just I like this overall professional but still prone to accidents characterization she's got up in here. It's really good. I like it a lot. This Fiat Lux moment here at this temple with the Desians and Colette is spectacular. It really puts into perspective how awesome and terrifying the Chosen's powers are, and how inhumane they are, too, really. Watching Lloyd react in this kind of concerned horror at Colette and what she's doing, but also how it's affecting her, it's very effective. I like it a lot. This father reveal is kind of boring, but I also found it kind of boring in the video game too, so I don't know why I'm mentioning it. It's really not Whatever. This moment between Sheena and Zelos with Corinne's bell is really, really nice. I like it a lot. I really like the dynamic Sheena and Zelos have got going on here. It's pretty much the same dynamic they have in the game, just a bit more mature in a way. It's really good. Ufotable's animation is stunning, even way back then. Like, just look at this. Oh my god. I don't like this confrontation between Briseis and Regal. I don't think their dynamic and story really translated well to the anime, but to be fair, a lot of, I don't know. It's could have been done better, but it's not terrible. I don't know where I'm going with this, so I'll stop. I really, really like Sheena and Lloyd's dynamic in the anime. It feels like they're pals or bros or like partners in crime. Like, it feels like they're best friends. Like, Sheena's Lloyd's like right hand man or something. It's really good. I like it a lot. Like, it's in the video game, it's kind of implied that she has a crush on him, but I think I like this strictly platonic, strictly like we're friends type thing they've got going on. Especially this moment here with Vault. Oh my gosh. This is so great. So great. I love the two of them fighting alongside one another. It's really good. Excellent. This is a great ending. I really enjoy this ending. I like this group. Like, having Zelos and Sheena join along with them is pretty genius. It's just great. Love it. Colette literally never fights in this anime, except for this one moment. Oh my gosh. Not a single time. Jesus Christ. This scene with Zelos is one of my favorites because it really puts, well, I'm going to say it again, it really puts into perspective the Chosen's abilities, and then we get to see what a full-fledged kind of Chosen that's come into their own is capable of. It makes Zelos and Colette's status as the Chosen have a bit more weight to it. And, that's all she wrote, folks. Tell me what you think, I guess. Or don't. Maybe. You don't have to. But if you want to, I 100% welcome it. If you've seen the anime or played the game or done both or will do both because of this video, I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. And, yeah, that's it.